Have you ever taken your drone out somewhere and taken pictures with the plan to make a 3D model, only to get back to the computer and find out that those pictures aren't as good as you thought they were? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you a complete walkthrough using Agisoft Metashape. I'm going to show you how to make a complete 3D model with all of the process, and then I'm going to show you also how to fix some of those mistakes and get the best quality out of the data that you have. Most of my experimenting has been done by doing it the wrong way. So this video is, well, you could call it a culmination of all of the things I should have done but didn't. Be sure to hit that like button so that this video will get shared between everyone in the community that has struggled with this. Let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start from a point where I'm assuming you have already went to agisoft.com, downloaded and installed Agisoft Metashape professional version. Okay, so first thing you do once you open it up, we'll go into the top menu bar here, go to Tools, go all the way down to Preference. We'll start in General. Now, I customize my theme by using dark. I just personally like it. I can see everything a little bit better. You don't have to if you don't want. Whatever makes it easier for you. So once we're here in the dark theme, I'll go to Customize. Now, I find it very useful to customize my shortcut keys. If you've ever done any kind of video editing, then you know how important this can be. It will end up saving you a lot of time. So I'm just going to real quick go through a few of the most important keys, but as you can see, there's options for all kinds of settings in here. And typically I'll use more than what I'm going to show right now, but these are just the main shortcut keys that I think are the most useful. First, I'll go down to Model. I'll go to Navigation. I'm going to double click. I'm going to create my shortcut key as A. Hit the check mark. Next, I'll go down to Rectangle section. I'm going to use button Q. Then I don't use circle selection hardly ever, so I'm going to go to Freeform selection. I'm going to make this W because it's right next to the Q key, so it makes it easy for me. Okay, so this shows right here if the key that I'm using is already being used for another option or shortcut key. It'll ask you if you want to override it. It'll say it's already used. I do want to override it. If you don't want to, you can pick another one. Okay, then we go up to Model View, Delete section. I use that a lot, so I'm going to use X for delete, and then I'm going to type in undo. Okay, so that's Control Z. So I usually like to just change that to make it easy for Z. So then I have X will delete and Z will be undo. I'll click OK. Then I'll hit apply. Next, I'll go over to GPU. In my case, I have two GPUs. I've got a NVIDIA and an Intel. Now, because the Intel graphics card is an OpenCL, I want to untick that box because I don't want to use that one. It'll just slow everything down. I just want to use the NVIDIA GPU. Next thing I want to do is go down and make sure that your use CPU when performing GPU accelerated processes is unchecked. Now, if your NVIDIA GPU is not very good, then you'll probably want to leave that checked. But if it is, then you don't want to use that because it'll slow it down. So next, I'll go over to Appearance, and this just allows you to change the background, the colors of your different views. I'm going to leave everything the way it is. Navigation, if you're using a specific kind of mouse. But advanced, now this is where you'll want to make some changes. You can use key points if you want. Keep depth maps, you definitely want to keep that. I'll just leave these boxes here checked. If you're using RTK in your images to help geolocate them more accurately, then you'll probably want to load the camera location accuracy from your metadata. Even load thumbnails if you so choose. And then come down here. If your project is very big at all, you want to uncheck this box because that will slow it down. Make sure that enable VBO support is checked. By default, it should be. That just allows you to easily view your 3D model and turn it and make changes to it without bogging your system down if the project is fairly large. Now, if you're going to use Python, you want to leave this checked. If you're not, you can uncheck it and then copy last shape. That one, again, doesn't matter. If you want to leave that or not, it's not going to make a big difference. So I'll hit apply and then OK. All right, so next what I want to do is take my images and drag them into my project. And I have both oblique and nadir images, so I'll drag both of those in here and you'll see them. Now sometimes you'll drag those images in here and you won't see anything, so that means one of two things: either your images are not geotagged, they don't have metadata in them, or your camera is unchecked, and so you'll make sure that that icon is on. This one is for LiDAR. I'm going to just turn that off. It doesn't really matter because we're not processing LiDAR. So now you'll see all the images are showing up here according to where the software believes those images are located. And this ball here represents, this trackball represents the center of your project. I'm actually going to turn that off. So I'm going to go to Model, Show Hide, and I'm going to hide the trackball. Now that I have all of my images loaded and ready to process, I'll go up here to Workflow, Align Photos. Now here you want to make sure that you're aligning on high. You've got several options from lowest to highest. I only would suggest using highest if you've already tried high and you're still not getting enough points to make your project look good. Otherwise, you're just going to be taking way too long to process, and it's kind of a point of diminishing returns is the phrase that I would use, because if you don't need it, you're not going to be making a better project. You're just going to take longer and still get the same results. So next, come here to Advanced. Now this says 40,000 key points and 4,000 tie points. This is the default setting. I would leave it there. If you have problems once you've processed this and it still doesn't have enough points to look good, you can up those to 60,000 and 6,000 or 80,000 and 8. And if worst case scenario you still are not getting the results that you need, you can change that to 0, and you can change this one to 0, and it will give you the best results that you possibly can get, because all that means is it's going to find every key point that it can and every tie point that it can. And it will also take infinitely longer time to process, but if absolutely needed, you can use that. So I'll leave this exclude stationary tie points. It doesn't really matter. That's more for pictures that are taken on a wheel or a turntable. So I'll click OK. Okay, now that the images have aligned, let's take a look at the project. So here you can see the sparse point cloud and the aligned images, which also shows the angle that the images were taken at as well as their position. I'm going to turn those off. So here you can see what I call the sparse point cloud, but it's also called the key point, or I'm sorry, the tie points. And so two things to keep in mind here is you have tie points and you have key points. These are the tie points, and just the easy way to explain this and to remember is that the tie points are features that were recognized in multiple images, and the key points are just special features that were recognized in a single image. So you can also think of the point cloud, or the sparse point cloud, as points from pixels of images. So if you break up an image into pixels and you place them in 3D space, then this is what it would look like. So the next part of this is we're not going to create a dense point cloud, which is what a lot of people would do. We're just going to create mesh from the sparse point cloud or the tie points. So two things you can do to clean this up. The first is use the selection tool. So you can either click here or use your shortcut key. I'll use my Q to select the rectangle selection, and then left mouse key to drag the tool, select by letting go. I'm going to hit X to delete, and then I'll do it again on the other three sides. Now that's not actually or absolutely necessary to do in this first step. I just like to do it because it'll help kind of clean up things. And I'm going to go back to the navigation tool. So the other part of deleting that is because here you can see what I call them stray pixels. You have all of the points that were misplaced. So we're going to clean those up, which will kind of show you why I clean up these edges here beforehand. So if we go up to the top menu, go to Model, come down to Gradual Selection. You want to click on the drop-down menu, go to Reconstruction Uncertainty. Now it's going to analyze all of the tie points. Once that's done, you want to use this slider bar here. So I'll slide this down. Normally I will not go past the 30 something mark. I'll stay inside there, somewhere in the 30s. 33 is probably good. And you can see how it highlights all of these points. So we'll click OK. Make sure you're on your navigation tool so that you can turn this without deleting anything. But this is the reason that I clean up these edges, because if I didn't, then that 30 would be taking up some of these outside points as well. So this just gives it a little more accuracy. So once you've got all of that highlighted, you can see most of your points, the dense part of the selected points are going to be here in the middle. And that's because when you take a lot of pictures from a close proximity to an object, you're going to have more misplaced points or uncertain points. So this is a very important part of creating a good clean mesh. Alright, so once all of those are selected and you are ready to delete those, you can either come up here and hit deletion, the X, or in this case I have my shortcut key X, and then it'll delete. Now you see there's still plenty of them left. I could do it again, but it would be the same as going below that 30 something number, and I don't want to do that, so we'll just leave it like it is. All right, so next what we want to do is start the process for creating mesh. So instead of creating a dense point cloud, and here if you want to do that you can build point cloud. But we're going to go to build mesh, and then the source will be depth maps because we're going to create the mesh from the depth maps. It'll be much easier to work with if you create mesh from depth maps instead of point clouds. All right, so quality, I'm always want to use the high setting. If you go to ultra high, you're just going to be working against yourself. Basically, it will take twice as long and the results will not be any better than they will be on high. The only time you would use ultra high is if you've already processed in high and you still had a lot of issues with the mesh. It didn't give you enough mesh, or you had a lot of holes or areas that weren't very well put together, and the ultra high would kind of give you hopefully put you over the top to complete the model the way it should look. But if all your images were taken correctly, then you won't need that. So we'll do that in high. Then we'll go to face count. I think default is usually medium, or it might even be high, but I want to create it in low. This does a couple of things. One, it processes much faster, but it also gives you the opportunity to look at your 3D model and see if it's going to be good enough. If it's not, then we can fix the mesh without having to start over. But this is going to be the quickest way to be able to get your project completed and have a look at it. Default should be like it is here, but if it's not, you can check the boxes. Calculate vertex colors. You always want that. You don't necessarily need to reuse the depth maps, but you can, or if you uncheck the box, it will regenerate your depth maps. But it will also give you the ability to change your depth filtering. So one of the things that will do by leaving that on mild is it will help clean up some of these pixels out here, and it'll kind of filter that out when it creates the mesh. So I like that option. So I'll go back to build mesh. Since it's on mild, I'll leave it there. Like I said, if it wasn't, you can uncheck that and then change it. So instead of clicking OK, I have already processed this map. So we'll just go ahead and take a look at what it looks like with the texture, or with the mesh. Okay, so here we have what is just the mesh without any texture. So this just gives you a real plain basic look. As long as you don't have any holes or anything really out of place, you're usually in good shape. But before going on to the next step, what I also like to do is look at the wireframe model. This will give you a good understanding of how your model is going to look when you put texture on it. Meaning that the more dense your mesh is, the better you're going to have it look when you put texture on it. So think of texture as just your color. The more polygons or triangles you have, the denser they are, then the more that's going to look good, because it'll kind of fill those in. Now, even in this case, you can see larger triangles. It's still going to look good because these are not too far apart. So just from what I see here, I think everything's going to look great. You can go ahead and cut off these edges. It's not really necessary, but one thing that I would suggest is going up to Model, go to Gradual Selection, and here we're going to check Connected Component Size. So it'll scan through the model real quick, and you have a slider you can take on. Normally you can go, I mean, all the way, but you really don't want to do that because it'll select everything. But what I normally do is go to up to 8, maybe 10 if I have a lot of stuff. And click OK, and you can see here it's selected things that are not actually connected. So this is kind of useful in some situations where you don't want to go through and manually delete things that will not look good. In this case, I'm going to leave them, and I will end up deleting them later. Probably the best time to delete these before creating texture is if you have a lot of pieces underneath, because you're going to delete those and you don't really care what it looks like underneath. If you, let's say that one of these trees here was not connected, and I highlighted or selected the tree in the same process I did with these other pieces, and I delete the tree before putting texture on it. Well, what would happen is all the color from this tree, being that the tree was deleted, will then be imposed onto this building. So that's one big reason for not deleting this before the texture. But again, if it's underneath, it doesn't matter, and it will just save time because you don't need to texture stuff that you're not going to see. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, so I'll use my rectangle selection tool and the left mouse to drag, and then I'll let off and hit X to delete. And again, I'll do it on these sides, and actually I may even straighten that up a little. And that's okay. So it'll be cleaned up a little more when we get to that part. But for now, it just kind of bothered me. So again, it doesn't have to be done right now. It's just something I kind of like to do to make it a little cleaner as I'm working through the process. The next step would be to generate your texture. But before I generate texture, I want to show you a couple of other little tricks if you have some issues with your model and you need to make some changes or fix some places that don't quite look right. If you do, then you can just skip this part. But let's look underneath here, because I know that there's a couple places that could be fixed if you wanted to. So let's see right here in this building, on the outside you have what looks like it's just an entranceway into the building. Well, if I can get it behind that tree. So if I really wanted to make that look cleaner, I could actually cut this mesh out and then just make it straight, a straight flat, and then when I add the texture, it will still have that look, and it should be even cleaner looking. In this case, it doesn't really matter because the trees are in the way, but let's say the trees were not there. One thing you could do is use your selection tool. I'm going to use the freeform selection tool, and you can just trace all the way around here on the edge of that building and then highlight all of this. Now, just like laser, it kind of goes through everything. So I'll hit my navigation tool. You can see if I was to delete this now, it would put a big hole in this roof, or in this wall and roof. So what I'll do is I want to line myself up to where I can see most of it. Even if you can't see most of it, you can do this a little bit at a time. So what you do here is you use your selection tool, in this case freeform selection tool. I'll push W, and then I'm going to select this mesh by holding down the left mouse key and the shift button at the same time. I'll select this area first. Now continue holding the shift key but let off the left mouse button and it unselects that area. So I'll let off the shift key, slide or zoom out a little, and then do it again. Be sure to hold the shift key, come in here, highlight this area, let off the left mouse button, hold the shift, keep holding the shift key down, and then now it's all unselected. I can then hit my navigation key and get lined up here. Now I'll hit the X for delete, and it now has a big hole where the mesh was. And of course I want to clean this little piece up here so that when I fix this area that doesn't cause me a problem. So I'll delete that. Alright, so now when you have a hole, you have to fix that hole. So the first thing that you want to do to make sure it's fixed right is use the selection tool. So I will use my W key for freeform selection. I'll go ahead and select all of this like that, and it's okay that other stuff is highlighted because I'm going to come over here to Tools, go down to Mesh, Smooth Mesh. And default is 3, but I want to also tick the box that says Apply to Selected Faces. That way it only smooths out this area. So I'll click OK. And it smoothed that out a little bit. Sometimes you notice it and sometimes you don't, but it did smooth that out a little. Now really the best way to do this is to cut all these little jagged points off, but it really depends on how well you need it to look. But for demonstration purposes only, we'll just leave it at that. Alright, so to fix this, go to Tools, Mesh, Close Holes. It'll analyze the holes and then it'll automatically select a level to close that hole. But before I do anything else, I'll click OK. Make sure I'm on my navigation tool. I want to scroll out and look around. So that closed, and sometimes it'll close up other holes that you may or may not have known about. So you want to make sure you look around first, because if it did close up something that you don't want closed, you'll need to use the Shift and Select key to unselect that other area. Alright, so before moving on, I'm going to switch to Wire Mesh View. So you can see here how it looks. So now if I had cleaned up all of the little jagged points, this would probably go straight across without having some of these edges in there. But in this case, like I said, it doesn't really matter. It's covered by the trees behind it, so it's fine. So to get that to be unhighlighted, unselected, just use my selection tool and drag anywhere off of the mesh area, and then it unselects. Or you can unselect it by highlighting it with the Shift key. Alright, so that's one way just to clean up problem areas. Keep that in mind. It's been a huge saver for lots of problems for me in the past. Alright, so now I want to show one more quick little trick that I use to improve my 3D model, and that is Refine Mesh. As you can see, there's 2.2 million faces, meaning there's 2.2 million little polygon triangles. Alright, well, if I want to increase this because I want them to have better detail, I can go to Tools, Mesh, Refine Mesh. Now, my suggestion here is to change this to low and then go to Advanced change this from 10 to 5. And then if you click OK, it'll take a while depending on the size of the project and the specs on your computer, but it will create a more fine, dense looking mesh. And so in this case, it would probably give me about 9 million faces, just based on the number that I have here and using that low setting. So if you use a high or medium setting, it could either crash your program or could take days to finish, depending on the size of the project. So there's really no reason to go any higher than the low setting. All right, so that's just another way that you can make your mesh look better. So when you build your texture, your default setting is going to be at 8K. Basically, that's creating a texture that's a size of an 8K image. So by default, you have in your advanced tab enabled hole filling and enabled ghost filling. Now that's a good feature to use because let's say in this case all of my images are really focused around the center of this area, so I'm not going to have as much detail around the outside. And again, you know that because the polygons are larger and there's not as many of them, right? So if any of the areas that are not covered real well, here's a good example. These are huge triangles here, so there might not be as much detail. And there might even be a hole in here. So that's the advantage of building texture and making sure that you have enabled hole filling and ghost filtering. It'll kind of fill in those holes. Now it's not going to look great, it's not going to be very good detail, but it will fill it in so that you just don't have missing gaps. Now the downside to that is that it's going to make your mesh or your texture not as picture perfect, and it'll kind of dull the look. So let's say that I had went ahead and generated that and I used the hole filling. So here's what it will look like. So you can see it's okay if you're looking at it from a distance, and here's kind of what that fills in, and it just kind of makes something there solid. So it's not as good looking. But if you don't need it that perfect, then that's fine. But if you do want good detail, one way to fix that is to go to texture. You have two options. You can either turn these off, which will give you better detail, but again, you're going to have holes or melted looking mesh, worse than this. So what I recommend is to double this to 16,000 or 16K, and then you can even add more texture. So this means that you're going to have one file of texture, and it's going to be 8K in size. So if I want to make this 16, and then I can add more texture to it, it'll give the project more detail. So to show an example of that, I'll click on this project that I created in a larger file with more detail, and I think you'll notice a huge difference. Okay, so as you probably notice already, it's a lot more detail. You can actually read the time on the clock. If I turn it and look at it on this other side, you can read the label or the signs on this building across the street, and the detail is just much better looking. Even though the trees never show up really good in photogrammetry, they look much better. You can actually make out this statue. It looks good. And if I was to click on the 3D model Let's make this a little bigger. You can see that I made the texture size twice as big as it was before. So now it's a 16K, and I added 4 texture files. So let's look at this. So all I did was add more. In this case, I left enabled hole filling and enable ghost filtering because I still wanted to be able to make some of this outline area look better, but still get the detail that I needed in here. So that's just one way to make it look better and still kind of cover up for having lower detail on the outside areas. So I'm going to export it, and you've got a lot of different options. So if you're giving this file to, say an engineering or architecture firm, then you'll probably want to use one of the file types for AutoCAD, so Autodesk, FBX or DXF, but whatever file type they want. One of the most common file types is, of course, OBJ. And then one of the file types I like the most is going to be your GLB. But the reason I like this is because it creates one type of, or one file instead of multiple files just to be able to see a single model. So it basically it wraps all of your texture together. Most people are not going to want that because if you want to export this into Blender or Unity, then you'll probably need it in FBX or maybe even OBJ. So we'll just call this TS for Town Square. I want to save, and then you can just export it. And I wanted to show real quick what it looks like with the higher resolution textures generated. Okay, now that that's exported, I'm going to do another one real quick just to show. We'll call this TS2. And I'm going to do this in the GLB file format. Just hit OK. And then that'll export, and we'll take a look at that real quick. Okay, so let's take a look at these files. So here is where I exported these to. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, so this GLB file is just a single file, and it's a 200 megabyte file. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. Now, the OBJ consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 files. And that's because we had generated 4 texture files at 16K resolution. So if you notice, where's it at? So we have 16K resolution and then 4 of those. So to view these, they have to all be, 6 of these files have to be in the same file folder. But again, those may be needed if it's going to be exported into another software to make this better looking or whatever needs to be done. So if we click on just the GLB file, and I'm just going to open this up in the 3D viewer that comes on Windows, so it's not as good looking, and the model's turned at the wrong axis. But I just wanted to show real quick how a single file can be used, and it doesn't look too bad. But this again is just a default viewer for 3D models, so it's not going to look very good. So anyway, I just wanted to show that real quick. All right, well, That's about it for this video. I know that it was kind of long, but I thought it was a lot of good information, and hopefully this will help some people. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below. Remember, this is a community to help people learn. So if I missed something that you have tried in your process, please, by all means, leave a comment below so that we can all read and learn from it.